Apparently, you need to add yourself to the stage if you plan on hosting a video, especially if you're planning on streaming by yourself, which I am doing today. But welcome, anyways, to the Data and API show. I am super excited. I'm also super tired and I'm a little bit sick. So today should be an interesting stream. What we're going to be going over today is React plus GraphQL. And yeah, it's an ecosystem that changes on a regular basis. It's one that has a lot of tooling available. So there's going to be a lot of stuff to look at today. Actually, I'm going to say there's going to be a lot of things to reference, but I'm going to show you the current way that I actually like to work with this stuff because I believe that it gives you a very powerful tool chain to actually work with. Now, it's not going to ever be just me streaming without doing something strange. So I'm going to attempt to do everything today in a hosted environment. I'm going to share a window in a minute where I will have both my Azure Cloud Console. So we're going to be using Azure Cloud Console, and we'll be using a online code editor. We'll be using StackBlitz today, and I'm going to attempt to actually run everything today through StackBlitz. So let me go ahead and get a quick look at the chat here. So we'll see, we got chat up and running. Very good. Let me know where you're watching from today. We'd love to see that. And because it's just me, I'm going to need you all today to be the chatties. So you're going to have to interact with me a little bit, and this should be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and start sharing off this screen here. I'm going to share a window here. So I'm going to share the window right there. Okay, so we should have that up and running. You get to see the beautiful Azure Cloud Console and a whole bunch of my ridiculous projects. We're going to create a simple Coleman, Alabama. Hello. We're going to make a simple. I need a project idea. I'm going to chat. I'm going to have you throw it at me. What's going to be the project we create today where we're going to create a React project around it? So while I'm going to wait for you to give me the ideas, I'm going to explain the stack we're going to be using. So if you're new to React, which is a little hard to imagine, but if you're new to React, it is then obviously this framework built on top of JavaScript. And it is one that utilizes things like the JSX syntax, which allows you to have like HTML in React, or HTML looking kind of things in React. I'm not going to go into that too much. It's a very vanilla framework compared to other things out there, Angular, Vue. It's one of those types of flavors. Now, the canonical way to bootstrap React, and kind of most likely will be that way for a long time, is a utility called Create React App, which is CRA. I'm not going to show you Create React App because I think that it's actually you just want to see like all the goods today. A spatial app using Postgres extension. I got like an hour here. Okay, maybe. We'll see. We'll see what we get. We'll see what we get out of there. This is about GraphQL, not about Postgres extensions on Postgres, but we'll see. So chat's giving me some good ideas out there. But what we're going to do is we're going to use Next.js, which is the framework that I prefer. There are a number of other frameworks that are coming out now. I know the Remix just came out, which supposedly is going to be really great. I haven't had a chance to have a peek at it myself yet. But I'm going to suggest Next because, one, it is very mature. Two, it's got a really huge community already. And three, it does everything. Like everything you would need. So if you want to do some server-side stuff, great. If you want to do some local stuff, great. If you need access to a server context, great. But it is a really powerful utility that gives you a couple of extra helpers on top of React. And so I will go ahead and make. I'll be making our project today with that and explain a little bit where we break away from React land into Next.js land versus things that are maybe framework dependent versus not. All right, that's enough gabbing. So the GraphQL part that we're going to actually address today is going to be using a newer utility to me called React Query. And why I like React Query is because it scopes down entirely to the React framework. So it's utilizing all of the traditional React benefity things that you may be used to. They're not trying to support different frameworks. They're not trying to support Vue. They're not trying to support Angular or anything else. It's able to just use a React context. So it's a bit leaner in that regard. It's very React-y in how you think to use it, and I find it very powerful. Now, React Query is not a GraphQL thing. So that is a query management library for a client that will allow you to basically put your data inside of your client. Let me go ahead and pull up the actual page for React Query so we can see that. So React Query at the top level, it basically just gives you a framework for stashing your data in React context, which then lets you be able, or a cache mechanism they have that allows you to pull your data out and subscribe to data changes all throughout your application. So again, a really powerful concept tied very specifically to React, very powerful. For the GraphQL part, so we have top level React, abstraction of Next.js. We have then the query management or data management, which is also our local state, which is our state management, and it maps it to our server state, React Query. React Query drops down one more level to then access to what we're going to use for the GraphQL bit, and that's going to be GraphQL codegen, which will allow us to write GraphQL queries and automatically generate those as hooks that work with the React Query data layer. So we'll see this all come together, and I think that's a pretty powerful concept that works really well. I haven't prepared like a framework, so we're going to do it together. You're going to see kind of the parts that get tricky or sticky, and I think that'll be fine and fun. But we're going to go ahead and start. Got another suggestion there, a tournament leaderboard. Yeah, we can do that with probably not doing a full-blown bracket logic though. So we might just do kind of a basic users getting values. I like the idea of a spatial app, but I'm not trusting myself today to knock that one out so quickly. We'll see what we get. We'll see what we get. Okay. Going over to Stack Blitz. If you're not familiar with Stack Blitz, it is an online environment that allows you to basically bootstrap projects and run with these kind of things. I'm going to go ahead and use that today to go ahead and test this out. Also, simple searching product catalog. Yeah, couple of good options there. So what we have here is a basic Next.js application, and we'll see that on the right-hand panel here, it is going to be loading the preview environment for us. So we get Next.js up and running here inside of our browser, which is kind of fun. All right, what we're going to start off with is we're going to go ahead and just delete this whole page here, the first index page. So first thing that Next.js provides on top of the traditional React way is that obviously it's using its own internal router mechanism for working with the browser so that anything you put inside of this pages directory automatically gets shoved into the router context that it creates. And so anything that it finds at a top level underneath pages becomes its own page. And then anything inside the API gets executed on the server. So that's one of the first things. We're going to go ahead and just dump everything out here. We don't need any of this. We don't need any footer at the moment. And we're going to just go ahead and run that by itself. That should give us basically an empty page, which is kind of what we're looking for. Very good. So now we need to go ahead and install our first dependency. I'm going to go ahead and sign into GitHub here because I want to be able to persist this just in case case things go south. All right. So what we're going to do now is try to add some dependencies here. And I'm going to use, I believe I can actually even just use the terminal here if I recall correctly. So we're going to go ahead and try that. And going to go ahead and do yarn. I think I have access to yarn here. Yarn React query. And yeah, that worked. All right, so then we're going to go ahead and while we're at adding our dependencies here, I'm going to go ahead and add GraphQL codegen. And actually, we're going to cheat here a little bit, and we're going to do a quick search for the React query GraphQL codegen guide, because there is the official plugin support here. So it's going to tell us the things we need to add. So we need to add in all of these utilities here, which is great. Also, as a helper for those that maybe don't have a lot of time to watch this, if you go to the Hazura blog and you do a search for React query, you'll find that I have written up this content. So I'm not flying totally blind today. You'll see that we have this this guide that I wrote that basically walks through a lot of this same stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the generator script. If I believe I wrote it down here. Maybe I wrote that in the next one. Let me see if it's this one here. See your codegen. All right, I'm going to have to, we can follow the installation guide. All right, installing codegen. So we're going to go ahead and add the add GraphQL, and then we're going to go ahead and add the CLI and see if the CLI actually works for us. So we're going to go ahead and try both of these. So starting off with adding GraphQL, and then we're going to try the CLI, which will walk us through scaffolding out some of the pieces we need. And then we're going to go ahead and run this here. And if I go back over to the codegen guide, basically what we should be able to do then is this script, which will init the GraphQL codegen setup. So we're installing two dependencies, and that will give us the ability to install our pieces, which is all fun. I'm going to have to use some fake bits at the beginning here. Yeah, well, I'm going to explain what the issue is. So I'm going to go ahead and init the codegen. Unable to find codegen config file, which is fine. Yeah, I'm going to show you what the issue is. I need to make the config file. I also need to create a couple of scripts for it to find. Otherwise, it'll just error right off the back. So we have a project here. We are going to go ahead and grab a new Hazura project real quick. So we're going to run with the leaderboard idea. I'm going to go ahead and just use the free tier for now to just kind of demo that this is possible to everybody. Superb escargot. I don't know if anybody else enjoys the names that these random hash thing. I'm not even sure what you refer to this as, but I always get a kick out of them. I find them pretty funny. So superb escargot, which we should almost use that as the idea for the project is escargot manager. All right, so what we're going to do is hop over to data real quick, and I'm going to just init a Heroku database. And so as we're thinking through our data model really fast, because it's not about actually using the Hazura part, we're going to have users tournament. And so a tournament is the whole tournament. We're going to have a game. Well, we're just going to track we'll track teams and scores, teams and their scores. and we'll be able to insert a team-minute score and be able to just kind of filter a sort of a leaderboard. Yeah, we're gonna do a pretty simple thing here. All right. If I have time to make it fancy, we'll do it fancy. I'm not thinking we're going to have like all the time in the world to extend this out. So what we're going to do is go ahead and call this the scoreboard. And I'm going to go ahead and use just a simple ID here, along with the created at and updated at timestamp. And we're going to go ahead and add in a team ID, which will make a separate table just for fun, because we have to like overcomplicate it just a little bit. We'll go ahead and have a team ID, and then we're going to go ahead and add in the I can't help myself. We got to do it. We got to do it a little bit proper here. All right. So what we're going to do is this is the scoreboard. So this is going to be the actual game. We're going to go ahead and call this games, and we're going to go ahead and put the score in there. And we'll do it this way for now. Integer, fine, and that should do it for that table. We'll go ahead and create that one, and then we'll make another table called teams, and we'll connect those two as a relationship. All right, so make another table here, and we'll call this teams. No, I'm pluralizing my Postgres tables. That's what I do. All right, we're going to go ahead and do the ID here. Say UID, and we're going to go ahead and give this the title. Go ahead and do text, and we'll call it name. That's a bit better. And I'm going to go ahead and just call that good for now. I'm going to go ahead and add, and then I'm going to go over to my relationships on the games, just so we have it connected here. And I'm going to configure this real quick. And say that we have a relationship that is a object relationship for every. I'm on my teams table, so it's going to be an array relationship. I'm going to go to games here, and I'm going to say it is a array relationship to team object. So every entry into games gets exactly one team, where the team ID is the same as ID on my, good. So game table, team ID, same as ID on team. Hit save, and then we can just make the reverse on that, which I want to do as an array relationship. So I have all the games of the, so we're going to call this one the array relationship. It's actually kind of a nice way to do this using the metadata with Hazura. I don't have to worry too much about foreign keys and things. That it's kind of a nice way to bootstrap it. So the ID from the team is the team ID, and I get an array relationship out of that. All right. Like I said, we're not going to be doing this too much specifically. So we have a Hazura project. I'm going to enable anonymous access. Am I going to do that? Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to enable anonymous access on this. I'm going to go ahead and go to my environment variables for this project, throw a quick new environment variable, Hazura GraphQL unauthorized role. Anonymous. So this is just a special string that will show up inside of my role-based access controls that will be what gets accessed for everything that's not available. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my console, and underneath my games, I'm going to go ahead and allow anybody to access those. So we go ahead and use anonymous, and they're allowed to read whatever they would like. Without any checks, and they're able to go ahead and just get everything in this case. All right. And we'll allow aggregate queries in this case. Okay. That's enough to get us started here. we can see that we have the select permissions for the anonymous role. And now we're going to go back to the API here, where I will snag the API access point for superb escargot and head back over now to GraphQL to Next.js. So I believe that the init script, it's probably needing the so it should just, let's go ahead and use the npx command. Maybe this is a static blitz error. In theory, I don't think it needed anything beyond that, but let's just go ahead and see what happened, why I got annoyed. npx GraphQL codegen init. There we go. So it is working. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and say it's an application built with React. That's fine. So we continue. Where is your schema? I am going to paste in the command. No, I'm not going to paste in the command. I'm going to paste in the API endpoint that we just talked about. And then my operations, I'm going to put inside of a subdirectory called, and this might actually already error on me, I'm going to call it queries. See. I'm going to see what it does. And I'm going to use GraphQL. Okay, and so we're going to use TypeScript required by the TypeScript plugins. Yes, we're going to use TypeScript operations and fragments. Fine. We're going to use TypeScript React Apollo. We're not going to use that because we're going to install a separate plugin. And we're going to go ahead and say, good, this is fine. And we're going to let it just choose to put it inside of a folder called generated. And we're going to just put it there. Do you want to generate an introduction file? Yes. You want how to name the config file, codegen.yaml? Fine. What script and package should it? All right, so we're going to call this just codegen. All right, so what we've done is we've said, go ahead and dump the output inside of the generated folder. Go ahead and name my configuration file codegen YAML, and go ahead and give it a package script called codegen in my case, which will generate the GraphQL. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put all my queries. I'm going to write a manual query called getGames or something, and that's going to be getGames.GraphQL, and I'm going to save that inside of a queries folder and at my root level. I'm going to run codegen, a script now. It's appended at the my package.json file. When I run that script, it's going to go ahead and look through all those files, and it's going to say, all right, I found the stuff that I'm looking for. Shall I go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of hooks out of that that you can then import into your project, where you're going to be able to fetch GraphQL content. And that's basically the rough gist, but we're going to go ahead and run through kind of how this all works here. So we're about the halfway point. Let's go ahead and try this. We're going to go ahead and look at the information we got generated here. So we have the schema is located there. Documents is going to be at a place called queries. So I need to go ahead and make that folder now, which I'm going to just do here at the top level. Yeah, new folder, I think is how they do that. Queries. And then we have our two first plugins, which are fine. But now what I want to do is install the React Query plugin for GraphQL codegen. So we're going to go ahead and do a search maybe here. Does that work? All right, so we're going to go ahead and add this specific script now. And it's installing that. The bits that I need to add to my thing now, so I need to add this plugin. and I need to add in the config for how it's going to go ahead and fetch content. We're going to have to skip the fetch parameters here because it's erroring right now. I don't know why that seems to not be working. The fetch params, it gives me incorrect data. So I'm going to just skip that for now. But we're going to go ahead and use this plugin and that config. So we're going to go back out to our file here. And we basically have, is it one level out or is one level in? One level out, okay. So we have essentially this. And that is what we need for our GraphQL codegen. So right now, it's not looking like too much, but trust me, we're about to see magic. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can refresh the page here, because I think all the things that's complaining about should be almost done. Let's see here. What's it complaining about? Let's go ahead and restart the server because I did like a whole bunch of stuff. Fine. So we have this now. I'm going to go ahead and test my first query that I'm going to write over to GraphQL codegen. So I'm going to do something here that's going to be something like a query get games. And we're going to do something to the effect of the actual team. Yeah, with the team ID for now, because it's going to be an authenticated request. Team. Oh, top level query, sorry. So games, which is what I have access to as my anonymous role, team ID, and then the score. So we're just going to go ahead and grab this just for the moment. That's going to be an unauthenticated request. I'm going to take that. I can prove that it works. Well, it's going to at least bring back nothing because there's nothing there. But let's go ahead and insert a couple of rows just so we have like something to look at. I'm going to make a new team here real quick. And I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and hide these tips. All right, insert row. We're going to call this the escargot warriors. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we'll make one more to go ahead and combat. So I don't know. I need it. I need some team names here in a little bit, so go ahead and start throwing some team names at me. But looking at my desk here, we got something like the Duracell Racers. All right. Yes, I have batteries on my table. And I can already tell that that the game's concept is probably a weak table relationship because I do not think this data model at all, but we're gonna run with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and browse the rows here, and we're gonna just go ahead and grab the we'll call the actual game. The team ID is going to be the team that won. Will be what we work with in our very rough mental model on this. Inserting a new game here, I'm going to go ahead and use the team ID of the escargot racers, and there was a point score of 48. And then going back here, we're going to go ahead and grab the Duracell racers, which we just are trying to insert a little bit of fake data here. And we're going to insert that one here as well. Team ID score of 17. Because, you know, why not? All right, we have games, we have teams. So now I go back over to the Next.js project. And I'm going to go ahead to my queries now. I'm going to make a new query called getGames.GraphQL. I'm going to paste that query, not the ID. I'm going to paste the query, not the ID. Get games. And what I'm going to probably have to do, well, I shouldn't need to because I've made that unauthenticated permission thing. So I'm going to go ahead and say yarn run or yarn codegen, because I don't have to use run because it's yarn. So yarn codegen, run that script, and it's going to go ahead and say I made an error, so I'm going to have to see why. But it's going to go ahead and say use the read the file, and then it's looking for the document. So it's looking like it didn't like how I have the codegen path thing. I'm wondering if this throws it there. So first of all, let's check the spelling queries, and this is never going to work because I don't have multiple dotted names. So we'll just do something more like this. Should say any subdirectories. Go ahead and use that. Let's see if that was enough to make it happy. Went wrong again, so it didn't like looking. So let me go ahead and try putting that dot back in place like I had it. See if I wasn't wrong on both fronts. So we're going to have to have a quick look here. So it found the documents, and it failed the validation of the TypeScript React query. So that's probably needing the, I shouldn't need that. I almost want to say that needs to be indented. And maybe there's a problem with the docs, but let me just try that real quick. So, yeah, thank you, Ian. That was definitely the issue. I was here saying that it's the, I think I was wondering about that. I think you might be right. So what Ian is saying is that the typical, what's that pattern called? That's called glob matching. The glob matching basically is saying that it needs the, so it's failing validation. What's it failing validation on? I thought that was it. But I have a working project that I may have to steal the code from here. So I may have to do that. All collection items must start the same line. Line 6. I don't think this is it, but the runs are cheap. So let's go ahead and just do a quick test. Yeah. So I believe that I'm gonna go ahead and look at the docs here in a second, because we don't want to spend all day trying to fight this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the docs to see what I'm doing wrong. So we have the TypeScript React query. We have the config is at the root level of plugins, and that's definitely not what I do have that. Okay, fine. And then we had the fetcher inserted. Okay. So that looks correct. So what we're going to do next here, this gets fun. Okay. I'm going to potentially have to steal the sample that I have running elsewhere. Right. I do have that enabled, though. So if I go back to API here, let's go and just verify it. So Ian's saying that I need to have the I should have anonymous enabled for games. So let me go ahead and just verify that and turn off the secret here. So I should be able to query the results here, and I can in an authenticated area. So I do have the permissions enabled, but that is one that you'd have to check for. So I'm going to just check real fast here because it's complaining about the plugin. I'm going to rerun yarn here to make sure that it didn't skip installing something, but I think I got it everything. I'm going to go ahead and TypeScript React query validation. So what I'm wondering is if the TypeScript React query is basically looking for a TypeScript project is what I'm wondering here. And the reason why, and this is not yet a TypeScript project. Fortunately, in Next.js, it's very easy to enable that, because it might be looking for like a DTS file or something. So if we go ahead and say that we want to enable TypeScript, we're going to go ahead and do this touch tsconfig JSON, which is a very simple thing. So we're just creating a very basic file here. And then if I say yarn dev, what it's going to do is say, hey, you're trying to do TypeScript, but you don't have TypeScript set up. So it's going to ask me to install these dependencies. So I say yarn add these dependencies. So TypeScript and TypeScript React, but we want to make those dev dependencies because we don't need those to be bundled to our client. And so what that's going to do is add a couple of extra things to our project. So I'm wondering if that's what if TypeScript React Query is complaining about, is that plugin is looking for some things like tsconfig JSON or other features that is saying, hey, like I need these to be able to work. So that might be what's going on here. Let's go ahead and have a check. The other project I had done was in fact TypeScript from the beginning. So let's try no dice. All right, so what's going on? Plugin TypeScript React Query validation. And we're going to try this. We're going to remove it, make sure that everything else executes fine. And the thing is, we can actually bypass this if we need to. No such file. So there's a different issue. So it's not liking this generated path here. So generates, and I think that might be yes. Let's go ahead and change that. Like I said, I like doing these things live because even though I've gotten this running a number of times, I find that it's very helpful to be able to kind of see what things would trip somebody up in a real environment. So that's going to be what we do here is we're going to say, go ahead and put this inside of generated/generated.tcs. Actually, I'm going to call this just GraphQL. So this is now theoretically going to create the actual file. Let's see if that creates the file for me. So now I get, in theory, a generated directory with GraphQL.ts. Let's go ahead and re-add our bits. Let's go ahead and try running that. Remove config. Config should be fine. Yeah, config is fine. So config is actually needed because you're telling React Query what your fetch paradigm is going to be. So you can use browser-based fetch, which is what it's doing here. You can use the React GraphQL query from Apollo, or from Prisma, sorry. Prisma GraphQL client, I think. GraphQL request, which is actually a good library to use. We might. Oh, let's just add it. This is actually a good utility to use as a replacement for fetch. Or you can also tell it here, instead of fetch, you can tell it that you're going to basically do your own. You're going to provide your own fetch client per instantiation of one of these hooks. All right, I'm explaining more than I'm showing, so I'm going to try and make this all clear as mud here in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it that we're going to use the React. I'm going to leave fetch for now, and then I'm going to show you how to switch this out for an easier client or a more flexible client in a minute. Okay, so what we have here, in theory, if we look at everything, what we should have is now we see that we've got the fetcher that's created for us in this generated file. This is a basic fetch utility. Then we have the types that it's pulling in from my Hazura system. So I have everything for local introspection. And then near the bottom, I should have a use get game function here. So use get game query, which is really cool because then I actually have a hook that I can fetch my content with. So I don't have to write that. Like that's a lot of TypeScript. I don't like writing TypeScript. I like using TypeScript. And we have that all generated. So basically, if you had not been a moron writing your files like I was, you would get the codegen set up properly. So the generates needs to have an actual path where it goes. Just use the defaults. Don't try to write them by hand. It'll work for you from the beginning. And then modify them after the fact. And then we added the TypeScript React Query plugin. That's all up and running. All right, so what we need to do to make this all come together at this point is actually use GraphQL React Query, which I believe uses a provider paradigm, if I remember correctly. So quick start, we need to use the query client provider. We're going to put that inside of our app file. So I'm going to just go ahead and use this same import here. I'm going to go over to the next blitz here, over to my app file. This is a Next.js paradigm. This basically says take everything from the top. So go ahead and wrap all of my pages with this base app component. And so we need to have the React Query Provider as a wrapper for all of our pages, or all the pages where you intend to use a query. Okay, so we have that. I believe I need to pass in a client. Yes. So we're going to go ahead and create a new client here. And that will actually be everything that we need to do to get the basics working. From there, we go over to here. We go ahead and instantiate our query client, and we can just pass this in now on the okay, that should be everything that it's looking for. I'm getting a small syntax validation error. So let's just see, I see it right there. There we go. All right. So React Query should be happy. They're instantiating that outside of the app wrapper, probably because it actually is using a cache mechanism. So I'm going to do the same. And then we go to, that should be everything we need to make that work. Okay, great. We're going to go ahead and pull data in. So we're going to go back to next. Let's go ahead and try booting this up to see if it actually is working now. I'm looking like I'm going to probably have to switch headphones here because my buds just totally died, but unfortunately I don't have anybody else with me today. All right, so we got a couple of issues here. Cannot read properties of undefined, which is specifically so it's a specific issue within the provider itself. So I'm going to go ahead and have a look back again, make sure I did things correctly. On that provider, they call it client. Read the docs, everybody. There we go. And let's see. Yeah, we have a blank screen. So now we're going to go actually to our page. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and actually try to bring in this this bit of data. So I'm going to go now to importing that mechanism from the which is underneath generated. Which I need to go out a couple layers. Generated GraphQL.ts. I should actually turn on TypeScript for this file. That would make my life a little bit easier. Use the get games. Use get games is what it's called. So I'm thinking I need to turn on TypeScript here because it's like driving me nuts. I'm going to go ahead and rename this file to TypeScript real quick. And we're going to go ahead. Yeah, see, it's already saying that path doesn't exist. One level higher. Let's go ahead and just do this the proper way. Could also be a all right, this could be a stack blitz not giving me the proper stuff, so let's go ahead and count together. All right, we're inside of the pages directory at the root level, so I should only have to go out one level, and then I should be able to find generated, and then I should be able to find GraphQL.ts, and then, so it's complaining about did it not? Import path cannot end without TS extension. Consider, okay, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And then can it do it automatically help me out? Here we go. Use get games query. Okay, so now we can take this and we'll say that we are going to go like this equals the use get games query. And now we have access to a whole bunch of helpful utilities here. So we have data. We have is error. Yeah. We have is fetching. Is loaded. Like we have all kinds of things, right? There's a whole bunch there that help us. So what we're going to do now is come down inside of our project and see what's it. An argument for data source was not provided. That one I was not necessarily expecting to see. Let me see if I, from forgetting something from what I had done last time underneath that blog post. There a React query. Data source not exposed. What would that be? What would that be? What would that be? So we pass in the client. And then you want to use the codegen. So we have the use mutation. Well, theoretically, that is, we'll figure it out here. Okay, so we've got, what arguments is it looking for? It is saying use get games query. Data source not provided. Okay, it's complaining about, yes. It is complaining about not having access to the fetch utility, which in theory was automatically created here. And that is a setting for the codegen here. So when we have the fetcher set to fetch, what I need to do is tell it the endpoint underneath fetcher because it needs to know what to use, because that's sometimes how these tools work. It needs to know where to request all this magical data. So I'm going to go back to the codegen file, and I'm going to take the URL here. Instead of saying fetch, which is asking me to provide everything, I'm going to tell it that you can use this. And that would be, make sure I get the syntax correct, endpoint underneath fetcher. Fine, let's go ahead and tell it now to regenerate the methods. And if I go back now to my page, it's no longer complaining. And so underneath this main page here, what we can do is we'll say, I'm looking for a loaded is fetched status. So we're going to go ahead and say is fetched. Go ahead and return then a div that will just loop over the results. I'm having a hard time seeing the editor myself. Data.map, and then we're going to go ahead and give that its typical stuff it's looking for. So we're going to give it the data and the index, and we'll return just the score. Should be on there as the .score. We'll put the key on there so it doesn't complain at us. So data.map is not a function because what's going to be returned is games from data. And we could have already seen that from the syntax. Okay, so now that I've made my way through all the errors here, and I want to explain basically what it was that we had done here. We added, the dependencies of GraphQL codegen. We added, we created a project, and then with the GraphQL codegen, we used the init script, and after a little bit of trial and error, got the file here, which basically just says take the, here's where you look for the schema, here's where you look for all the queries that you wrote, and here's where you go ahead and here's where you pass into the fetcher for the React query request, use this endpoint to make those requests. So I'm a little bit tight on time in terms of what's planned. If you want to stick with me, I'm going to go ahead and add a mutation just to show kind of a little bit of how this now iterates just a little bit. What we're going to do as a quick demonstration is go back here. I'm going to go ahead and open up permissions on the game. So if we go to the games point, and I'm going to go ahead and grab one of these for memory's sake. I'm going to permissions, and on insert, we're going to go ahead and allow anonymous to be able to insert games, but it can't delete any. So we're going to go ahead and say without any checks, it is allowed to insert a score and a team ID of the of any table. But the ID and the created that, updated that gets auto-generated. We'll go ahead and save permissions on that. And so what we would do is we would go back to our API here, and we would do something like mutation, and we'll call this create game. And then we're going to give this a couple of variables. So we'll say team ID, the UID, which I don't think I made that required. And then we're going to go ahead and call this score. Is an int, is a int. And then we're going to use that mutation here to say insert games1. And we're going to go ahead and say that the team ID is team ID, and the score is score, and then we'll just return the ID here. Now, I could return the score itself or something like that, because you can do optimistic updates to the UI with React Query. You can do things like where it says, hey, give me back the response and do something else with that, update the cache, or do other things that are helpful, but out of scope of what we're doing here today, also out of time. But we're going to go ahead and now take that mutation that I created, and I'm going to make a new file underneath the queries directory. Now we're going to go ahead and call this the create game.graphql. And just pasting that in there, I don't have to worry about variables. I can just paste this in here just like that. And I'll hit save. I'm going to go ahead and generate the utility there. And so it's going to generate a new hook for me based off of this file, the create games now. So I go back to my index, and I come in here and I say, oh, something to the effect of, let's make a button at the bottom here. And I'm going to have that be a create game, or insert game button, and we're going to give it input here for some scores. And then we're just going to throw a couple of quick things up here. Let's go ahead and import React real quick. You'll notice I didn't actually import React because this is Next.js, and it automatically inserts it everywhere you go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and say const score set score equals react.useState. Not a number, but 0. And then we're going to go ahead and make a handler. Handle create our insert. I actually like naming my handlers after their behavior. Some people don't. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give this behavior here, the onChange is going to be, I know I'm breaking a lot of paradigms here. Set score e.target.value. So it's yeah, it's gonna make me do the extra work. We're gonna cheat here just a little bit. Yeah, target.value. Can I zoom in here? I'm having a hard time seeing it myself. Yes, double. That's the issue. Nope, not the issue. Set score e.target.value. It's complaining that. Okay, that's a TypeScript error though, so I can ignore that. We're going to put the value here of score. Okay, so we should be able to just like go 100 whatever. Cool. So we have the basic behavior here of setting values and an input. I'm going to go ahead and say on click. This is just React stuff, right? So this is not nothing special. So make an input and then do something when you hit the button. Very good. Now what we've got is, so we have the basic framework. We want to do is be able to use this mutation hook that we created. Well, now we go ahead and just input that. we'll say use create game. And I'm going to go ahead and come down here now. And I'm going to say const mutation equals create game, add a plus in front of the target value to cast these. Just ooh, interesting. Let me try that. Does that work? TypeScript like that? Oh, Aaron. Thank you. That's cool. I'm a bit of a TypeScript noob, but I'm liking it. We're going to go ahead and say the use create game mutation. And yes, that's all we need. But here, we can either do it this way, mutation, or what I oftentimes like to do is just pull in the actual value itself. This is the actual method, so you'll notice there's a lot of other things on here as well. We can access the error, we can access data, we can access everything else we would normally need to access. The success is reset back to a previous state. The variables that we pass in, we can access everything. I'm going to do this in a very simple way in this case. So we're going to go to the insert handler now. And I just say, okay, mutate. And I'll pass in the variables here. And in this case, I'm going to pass in the score. And then the team ID, which I have in my clipboard history here. And that is all we need to be able to do this. Now, I don't have this set up as a subscription, so it's not going to. Actually, it might, because GraphQL does refresh on cache changes. We can go ahead and try this real quick. Otherwise, we can go ahead and also do another behavior. So if I refresh the page now, there's probably 100 on there. Yeah. What we can do on the mutate is where we define it. We can say on success, we can put a success handler on here, and we can go ahead and tell it to update the use game query, which I believe is a refetch method. So I believe that's a function. Yes. Refetch. Yeah, so if I go on success, then I need to make this into a function here to call the other function. Okay, so what we can do now is I can say when I have a successful callback, refetch the other things. So I'm going to go here now to say something like 500. And then in theory, yeah, it does a refetch for me automatically. So I'm over. You're still with me. I appreciate that. So I'm gonna explain again in brief what we did because this is about as far as I can take it today. If you like this content, let me know and I can do a follow-up stream on this. But yeah, they're successful at the end. What we have here is we created a basic Next.js project, nothing fancy. Made a TypeScript. I don't think that was actually necessary. That didn't solve the problem. I think that was actually an issue with my codegen format. But we have a project. TypeScript is good. Use TypeScript. So we have a basic Next.js project, which gives us helpful parameters like a router. While we have these like a helpful router and things like that we can use. Like good, fine, fun. Inside of that index page, we then so we have a page that we were setting up when we have a wrapper component. The wrapper component, we just said go ahead and use a React query cache state management utility that just is going to wrap everything and put a global cache in place that it makes keys and inserts keys of the cache for us, and we don't have to think about it. Like it just handles it for us. So we put that in place and we wrap that around the pages we want to work with. Then we have an endpoint that's serving a GraphQL API. We made a quick one with Azure. then we went ahead and created some actual query documents here. So a mutation and a query. And using that mapped to our codegen here, we were able to go ahead and say, use the React Query plugin and use this endpoint as the fetcher and go ahead and generate this file for us that allows us to import all of our typings and import in specific these utilities here at the bottom. And then with those utilities at the bottom, we get a hook that is working with everything that we needed from React Query. Like, it was like super powerful utility where you got things like, I mean, we showed how quickly we were able to just solve that pattern of being able to just say, yeah, on this successful mutate, update my other query. Like, that's all stuff that we get for free with React Query. Super, super powerful tool. It's something that I think that you're going to enjoy using a lot. Again, I appreciate you bearing with me. I was a little bit out of my mind today, not feeling great. So there we go. Everybody's sick. It's winter. But again, this tool is really powerful. If you want to have the concise and the clear version of all of this, check out the blog post. There's two parts. One is the one about just getting set up with React Query. One is about connecting it to GraphQL codegen. I will even drop the latter of those here in the chat for everybody to be able to access. If you like that kind of content, let us know. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next stream. We have a full program for December and going into January. We'll even be having the creator of React Query join us later on in the year. So that'll be pretty great. And that's it for today's stream. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific.